Hey fellas, welcome to Guys in Grief, sponsored by Emma's Footprints and First Candle. We started this podcast for fathers like us that have experienced pregnancy or infant loss. You see, when we went through these life-changing experiences, we struggled to find resources that were specifically for men in support of navigating this grieving process. We're not doctors. We're not psychiatrists. We're three friends. We're grieving fathers that have been through the unthinkable and want to help others by talking about the unique and often undiscussed perspective of men that have experienced child loss. We welcome you to join us on this journey. Share your stories, the challenges, laugh with us, maybe shed a tear or two, and help each other as we navigate honoring our children, grief, supporting our family, and trying to find better days ahead. Let's get into it. Well, welcome to another episode of Guys in Grief. I'm Brad.
I'm Brian.
I'm Brandon. We did it again.
You'd figure by now we'd have this shit figured out.
We should, but we are such clowns. Go, Brian.
I think you should just introduce us next time.
No.
No. That's
we're
not how we do it.
You
normally go. You normally go, then I go last.
Yeah.
Actually, no. I think it's the other way around, Brandon. I'm pretty sure.
Is it me?
Yes.
Oh man,
we're gonna awkwardly.
Jeez.
It's like
it was like a stare down. I'm like,
I'm with all the women's right. Like, yeah. That is literally our skill set here in introducing ourselves. Boys, how we doing?
Well, I'm Brandon.
Hey, pleasure.
We're doing good. It's nice to see you guys
Doing
again.
good,
Another week episode. I'm thrilled to see you guys.
Absolutely. It's some really powerful stuff. It's amazing to see the amount of followers that we're getting on our social channels, the amount of listeners that are coming in for every single episode. I'm just blown away. And it's almost not worth talking about the numbers at each episode because we record and then release it 2-3 weeks later. And so the numbers just continue to grow. But we just wanted to kick off with a huge thank you to all of our listeners. We're so grateful for you.
Yeah, and I just want to add, it's been amazing interacting with our listeners too. Like, we love hearing from you guys. We love the feedback. We love hearing your stories. I mean, it's really great interacting with you guys, and it's just a pleasure to do this podcast and talk about our feelings.
Absolutely. I think I reached out to you, B, the other day, just saying, "Wow,
yeah,
just." The outreach that we're having is just phenomenal. You really can't. I really can't express just how much love I have for everyone that's supporting and reaching out and commenting and giving their heartfelt stories, giving that out stories to everyone. So I do appreciate everyone. Love everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, we have a handful of listeners, and those of you know who you are, that literally the day an episode releases, message us with their thoughts about the episode and what they've talked about with their spouse or their partner. I don't know about you guys. I just never. I hoped that type of stuff might happen, but it didn't even think it was going to be a reality for us. So I'm just truly honored.
Keep sending in the feedback. We love it.
Keep it coming. Speaking of always having fun and exciting topics, Brian, let's jump into a G&G Q&A.
Okay, boys. So this week, I want to dive into having children after a loss. And
Huge
there's a lot to unpack here. Obviously, I'm sure we could talk a full hour about this. But, you each have we all have different perspectives on this, and we've gone through it. And I'll start off with Brandon. Talk us through a little bit the thought process of, did you want to start trying to have more kids after? How long did that take? Some of the difficulties, having it, and then, we'll go to Brad.
No problem. Well, it took forever, and did it happen? No. So no. Overall, yes, the goal was to have, more children after, the loss of Story. But it did not work out. I mean, we went through a whole nother IVF cycle. Infertility. they know my first name, put it like that, at, the hospital, so on and so forth, just going through the process of trying to have, another child. So did we want it? Yes. Did it happen? No. So the next step, I think, for us is, financially for that, like, all right, that's a lot of money for those processes. What's the next step? Adoption. We're looking into adoption. Process, is it expensive? Yes. Is there opportunity to have another baby? Yes. But the process, has it runs its own course, and, it's not a easy process, which you would totally think it was just someone doesn't, want their child. Hey, we'll take the child.
Mm-hmm.
More than a million times a day, me and my wife, Joellen, say this, we'll take them. We're reading stories on the news, we'll take them. You're seeing TV shows, Chicago PD, Fire, Chicago Fire, so on and so on. They're having these, I don't forget what those things called, where they put, like, say a mother doesn't want their child or father doesn't want, they put them inside a bin at a firehouse that's like temperature controlled and so on and so forth. Joellen was like, we need to get one of those in our front door. Absolutely agree. I totally agree. Like, I'm cool with that. We need a farmland, and one of those bins, so on and so forth. We will take a child in a heartbeat. So like I said, the process is kind of difficult, but I mean, who knows? God has it in his hands, so we'll figure it out.
Brandon, how did you and Joellen get comfortable? Sorry, Brian, I know G&G Q&A is your thing, but I think it's a good question. With the idea of adoption, knowing, you have Gavi, just, and obviously you're still on that journey, but
yeah,
it's something I'm asking almost for my own edification here too. Like Jessica and I have talked about it, but we're not even started yet because there's a lot of fear there.
Yeah. So the fear is that, number one, Gavi will feel comfortable enough with someone else in the house.
Sure. And
also the internal fear with your own self of, you don't want to not raise this child like they're your own. They will be your own. They are your own at some point. But just the subconscious thought, like, of, wait, you're not my child, but I still want to love you like you are, and you will be. It was definitely not a light switch of a conversation. Like, hey, let's just adopt. But it was a lot of conversation between me and Joellen of, are you comfortable with this? I know for me, it was definitely a struggle just because I'm very protective of both my children, Story and Gavi, and how they are perceived, number one, as African-American children and mixed children at that, and making sure they understand and identify who they are, both in their Polish-Irish community and also in their African-American community. So I want to make sure that, they understand that you are someone valued in all races and within these three races that you are, accompanied by, but also around the world. And I don't want that to be limited with them. So that was a big thing for me, just to make sure that she understands, Gavi, that is, and Joellen, that understands that, this is a big step for all of us in the family.
Yeah. And Brad,
it was tough.
Yeah. And Brad, you're in a different part of the journey, as you said. So can you talk a little bit about how it's going?
Yeah. Right. Obviously, a couple episodes I shared our story, and clearly we tried multiple times after Beckham, and then lost Ari. And when we got to the point of losing Ari, we've used that horrible term. Our wives are geriatric, and and we got to get rid of that one. Let's come up with a different one, and then we'll send it to the medical community. Let's do that. That'll be our goal as G&G.
Cougar.
Yeah, they're
golden.
Cougar.
No, how about golden?
I think of like Golden Girl. Yeah, maybe.
That's what I mean. That's what. That's too old.
Golden Girls. No.
Yeah, they're quite up there.
Betty
but
White.
Yeah. All right, rest in peace, Betty. Shout out.
Yeah.
Shout out.
So we kept trying, and we wrestled with the decision after Ari that we couldn't go through the heartbreak anymore, as much as we wanted to have another child. And we live in this amazing neighborhood where literally 3 doors down from us had a baby, their third baby yesterday. And 2 doors next to that, they're due next month. And talk about triggers everywhere. It's amazing. Love it. But we want to grow our family too. And so we've talked about adoption, but the big fear that we've had, my biggest fear going through IVF with Ari was, and I may have said this on this pod, but was going through all of that and ending up empty-handed. Yeah, the money, the heartache, the time, the physical components that Jessica was going through with shots and doctors and everything. The worst thing in my mind was going through all of that and not ending up having a child. And then that happened in obviously horrible fashion. Listen to the Ari story. And that's our fear now with adoption is there's no guarantee, right? Like, it's not like you can say, cut us a check and you can get a child and you're guaranteed to get, you could spend all that money. You could spend years. You could say, you could do all of that work and they could say, tomorrow a child is yours, come pick them up at 5:00. And then the mother or father could change their mind and that rug's pulled out from you. And so we're super triggered by that we want, literally there's nothing more in the world that we want than to have another child. Seeing Ashton play by himself all the time, all of his friends, especially now in the winter when it's cold and they're all home and playing with their friends or with their siblings. That's really, really tough, but I don't know if we're ever going to get to that point because I don't know if we're ever going to get past our fear in what might not happen.
It's so interesting. You both said fear a lot, and we obviously were fortunate enough to have Grace and
happy birthday, Grace. By the way,
happy birthday, Grace.
My big 3-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah, no, time flies. But I did have a different type of fear. For everybody that listened to my episode, we lost Austin. He fell asleep or he passed away in his sleep. I was fearful of being a dad, that I had so much guilt that I didn't think I was capable of being a dad. Like I was so sad, and I didn't think I deserved another kid, as real as that sounds. I mean, I did have moments where I'm like, I felt like I screwed up. This is my fault. And I don't know how I'm going to move on. But we did want another kid, you kind of work through that and you communicate, but it was fear. I'm still fearful. I just, all of us that have gone through this loss, we know that pain is possible. Before it happened, we didn't think it was possible. It never happened to me, but it did. It happened to us. So I always have that fear that something bad could happen again. So that was really tough. But obviously when Grace came, you're focused on the baby. So
Brian, what did that process look like for you guys? Because I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there with maybe this level of fear or concern, and they and their wife are talking about, should we try again? What was, you don't have to take us into the bedroom when you and Lindsay talking type of thing, but like, how did you guys say like, all right, let's do this?
It's communication. I mean, as you heard on my episode, we talked a lot with our minister, and it was us being positive with one another, complimenting it, reinforcing that we can't take the blame for that. We are good parents. Our oldest, Colin, who was alive, he reminded us a lot that we are good parents, through his actions or even his words. And I think that helped us realize like, okay, we can do this. But it wasn't easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like I didn't think I deserved another kid. I felt so guilty about losing Austin that it was a tough process, but we made the decision we wanted to have another kid, and we were fortunate enough to be able to do that twice. So
have two beautiful girls, man.
Thanks for sharing that, Brian.
Yeah,
thank you, man. Never knew that.
We
go ahead. With that, we'll hop into Scott.
Absolutely,
our guest.
Yeah. We've got an awesome guest here, and we're really excited to welcome into the studio Scott Beasley. Scott, come on in, man. Hey, Scott, how are you?
Hey, guys.
Hey.
How you doing?
Doing well. It's, listening to the stories that you guys have been sharing right now, man, certainly sets the tone, I think.
Hopefully it wasn't too sad.
Yeah. It's some of these we do are a little more lighthearted. Some of them are more real talk. But that's the reality of this world we're in, right, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. So yeah, I mean, it's great to hear you guys sharing, and I really appreciate that. And I'm glad that there's this community that's being created out of that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
and
we're not alone. We all go through similar emotions and experiences, and it doesn't get talked a lot about, amongst men. So, we appreciate you joining us.
There's some awesome light at the end of the tunnel of all of this, and we'll get into that as we tell your story, Scott. But there's a reason we did that G&G Q&A, and you guys have some beauty to share with us as well. But before we get into all of that, we want to know who's your dad and what does he do, and learn a little bit about Scott Beasley. So tell us about
that a little differently.
That was good, wasn't it? That felt more natural.
Yeah, that was good.
That was a sleepy Arnold.
That's right. Mm-hmm. But Scott, introduce yourself. Tell us about your family, your life outside of family. We'd love to learn about you.
Sure. So obviously my name is Scott. I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee right now. I grew up in Arkansas. I actually I was a freshman when Brad, your wife, Jessica, was a grad student at Carnegie Mellon. That's how we got connected. I don't know if the other guys knew that.
Do you notice I'm rocking a Hamilton hat for you with a little love for musical theater?
Yeah. That's I was listening to some other episodes. I heard you guys talking about the Bills. I was like, I know there's a diehard Steelers fan in that house too.
There is. That is very true.
So I went to undergrad and grad school for music. I was a singer, vocal performance major, and everything. Did a lot of the opera and musical theater for a while. Met my wife my last semester of grad school, and shortly after grad school decided I didn't really want to pursue that career anymore because it'd be a lot of time away from home. We later obviously got married and everything, went through a couple different careers. I've landed in the world of financial planning, which is what I do now, helping people save money and, protect themselves, which is also interesting in the story as well, because I work in risk management basically and preparing for the unknown and unknowable. So it's added to that as well. But yeah, so like outside of that, I was doing a presentation the other day and I said all the interesting facts about my life are on a hiatus for right now because we have 3 kids under 3 in our household, which is a lot to chase around.
Absolutely.
We moved and there's now like a 30-minute commute to daycare and back and everything. So my oldest, Cameron, she turned 3 in September. She was a home birth. And so I actually caught her when she came out. It was a planned home birth. Like that was always the follow-up question. Like, did you guys mean to have her at home? I was like, yeah. It was a plan.
Yeah, we got to know the answer to that. Yes, it was.
Yeah. It was a plan. Yeah. It came faster than expected. She was the fastest delivery, surprisingly. So she was born 6 months before like COVID rocked the world. And then Mason, my son, he just turned 2 February 1st. So he was born in 2021, masks and all during COVID and the hospital and everything. And then we'll get into more of the story, I guess, in the details, because Abigail was in between there. She and Mason would have been 13 months apart, I think, if she had been full term. So they were going to be really, really close siblings. And then Eloise is our newest, who came November 18th this past year.
Congrats!
Yeah.
Amazing, man.
So,
congratulations.
You say November?
Yes.
Oh, man.
So she's like 12 weeks old right now.
How do you look that good having
a
baby that young?
No wrinkles.
There are some. I mean, the blue light glasses help with a lot of other things.
There you go.
So, no, she's great. All of our kids have had like something that they're really good at and then like a trade-off. She's probably like she's not the most difficult sleeper, but she's the one that nurses the easiest. And so like she gets satisfied with that. And she's just started hitting that like overnight sleep over the last week or so. But there were some nights where I was up like 3-4 times every couple hours in the middle of the night with her. So
Jeez.
You guys like, it's good that we didn't do this a month ago. That might have been rough.
We wouldn't have had you then. Well, Scott, sounds like you got your hands full at home. That's amazing with having 3 kids at such a young age. And thank you for sharing them. We certainly want to hear more about them. But the reason that you're here with us today is about Abigail. And so we'd love to learn a little bit more about Abigail and what you guys went through. So, take us back to, I think it was 2021, right? Late November, 2021. What happened? And we'll turn the mic to you.
Yeah. I'll back it up just a little bit.
Please.
Because, so my kids have cool birth dates. Like my son is 2/1/21, so February 1st of 21. And I think we found out my wife was pregnant. It was June or July. Like I remember that morning. It was like she was still nursing, and it was like, oh my God, how did this happen? I mean, we know how it happens and everything, but
it happened. Yeah,
I said the same thing to my wife.
It's one of those things like there's this whole thing like if you're still nursing, you can't get pregnant. Sure, like that's never happened. But anyway, I just remember like going to an office thing, and there were some people I was close with in the office, and I just like showed them a text message. Like she hadn't texted me that, but I was just like, I showed them a picture of the positive pregnancy test, and it's just like, oh my God. And like I kind of mentioned, she was going to be born March the following year. So like, and all our kids had come like right at the cusp, like the 36 weeks. So I was like, they might be like really, really close together. And so, everything was just kind of going from there. We had a scare before it happened. So around 14 weeks, I had gone to the gym, and I was like wasting time looking at social media or like trying to pick music or something like that. It was maybe 15-20 minutes away from my house, and I got a text from my wife or a phone call. I don't remember. And you guys talked about on another podcast, like there's some things that are just a blur. And then there are some things that are just like still images.
Yeah, good point.
And this was the first time. And she was like, I'm bleeding. I need you to come home now. And so I rushed home. I was like, thank God. Like I hadn't walked in yet. Like I was still in my car, just like rushed out of there. Got home, and I remember my wife being like, okay, you can watch the kids. I'm just going to go. And I was like, what are you doing? No. And I think the kids were like maybe napping, or one of them was napping, and we threw them in the car. We went, and we live about 6 to 7 hours away from any close family, just like right in the middle of 2 places. And so we get there, and this is while COVID's still kind of peaking in 2021. This was like summertime or fall. And so we like go in, and we were calling babysitters and stuff like that to get somebody to come take care of the kids. And we ended up sitting, because my wife wasn't 20 weeks yet, we sat in the ER for 3 hours while she was bleeding, thinking that she was having a miscarriage at that point. And luckily somebody came to take care of the kids and everything. I think one of our babysitters came and then swapped out with a different one, but that's not as important. And so it was a Sunday afternoon, and we finally got taken back to the back, and we got the radiology tech was like scanning everything, and she like didn't turn on the ultrasound speaker, and just was like scanning my wife's belly, and we're just sitting there. We've been
not hearing anything
for like over 3 hours. We didn't hear anything, and she just looks at us. She's like, "What's wrong, guys? Like." Everything's fine. Like, what are you worried about? We're like, we both had this like, and kind of broke down at that point. And she was like, oh no, like there's a heartbeat here. Everything's fine. She's like, don't know what it is. but you're okay, and the baby's okay. We eventually get out of there, and we're like, kind of explain to her why we were anxious. But we eventually were discharged, went home and everything, and we had scheduled an appointment for the next morning. Went in, that ultrasound tech who wasn't, and I say just about some of these things, but like the radiology tech didn't really know how to work that machine the same way. So the ultrasound tech, amazing person, was like, I think this was just, I think they called it an abruption, where like the placenta kind of like came off of the wall, and that caused a ton of bleeding. No, got checked out, and everything was okay. We're like, okay, we're good. Everything's free and clear. So that was about 14, 15 weeks in. A little over a month later, it's a Sunday morning this time, and everything had been fine at this point. And my wife came downstairs. I was up early because I always get up early. It was like 5 a.m. And she was just like, she said that there had been some discoloration of stuff. And we're just both just kind of like, okay, we'll wait a few hours, see what it is, and we'll call the doctor if needed. And that all just changed very quickly. It was very quickly like, nope, something's wrong. We've got to go.
Yeah.
So it's wake the kids up, put them in the car seats and everything, driving to the hospital where we'd been seeing a physician, because we were not a specialist clinic, but one that like had some midwives and for various reasons, but we probably should have gone someplace closer. And my wife even said, if there's a time for you to speed, it's now.
Yeah.
And she was even saying, like, you know, screaming, I'm saying it very calmly now, but saying that she believed she was giving birth and everything. Wow. And she knew that something was wrong.
How many weeks along is it this point, Scott?
We were at 20 weeks.
Okay.
This was a Sunday morning. We hadn't done an announcement yet. My mom had texted me the day before. We had just been telling friends and family, and we had announced our other kids pretty early on. And that's a different part of the story after this too. But like, we were going to have an anatomy scan the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom had texted me the day before saying, hey, when are you going to make a social media announcement? I really want to tell people I'm having trouble, like, kind of keeping it a secret. And I think I like hadn't even responded to her or something, as you do sometimes.
Yep.
And so we get there and basically said she was 20 weeks and we needed to be taken to labor and delivery. And I think I had pulled up to the emergency room entrance with everyone, got her out. They got her in a wheelchair, and I parked the van and somebody helped me take my kids back. And I think my son was still in like his car seat that pops out, pops in. So I put him in a stroller. Jeez. And like my daughter was maybe 18 months at the time, 18, 20 months, something like that. I don't think she was 2 yet. Maybe she had just turned 2. And so I think I was carrying, I don't remember that whole setup, of course. But I remember I got back there and she was in a different room and I could just hear my wife screaming. Kind of like if you're in a horror movie and you're going down the hallways at a hospital, because no one else is really there other than the nurses. And they said, you can take your kids over to this other room that was across the hall, which was an actual like patient room. She was in a triage room. And I was there trying to like, I mean, it's still early in the morning for my kids. I think my son was still asleep. I was trying to like just occupy my daughter. And then a nurse came in and she said, Dad, you need to go over here. And that's kind of when I knew. And so I walked across the hall and my wife was, shaking and there was, everything everywhere. I don't want to be too graphic and everything. But she didn't really, she like kind of knew what was going on, but she didn't want to believe it. And I could kind of see what had happened. And I didn't want to believe it either. And so I just held her hand and told her that she was going to be okay, because that's all I knew, is that most likely she would be okay. And I think she asked, and believed that Abigail was still in her. And they just kind of said, no, like she's already been born. And my wife had thought she passed a blood clot because she had passed some blood clots previously. And she really broke down at that point. And I was just trying to hold her hand and support her. And her OB showed up. And he was pretty empathetic at first. I mean, through the whole thing. They asked if my wife wanted to hold her, and she did. And you guys talking about things in one of the podcasts I listened to about things they don't prepare you for, and that's one of the decisions that I was not prepared for. And there were a lot of other decisions that followed that I was like, I don't know how to make this decision, and I don't know if I'm going to regret it in the future. And that was one where I don't know that I regret it, but I didn't think I would be able to hold her and be okay. And so my wife did, and I never did. And that's something that I think is hard, but I just wasn't at a place I could do it with some of the decisions that you have to make. The OB asked her a bunch of questions very quickly, trying to gather information to figure out what happened. Long story short about him is he made a diagnosis very quickly that turned out to not be accurate at all and would have put us in a worse situation in the future. Luckily, we did not go back to his practice.
Wow.
Whoa.
We got there. Everything started about 5 a.m. and Abigail was born around 7 a.m., maybe a little bit before. And so then we were there with our two kids, and they'd been up extra early, and we didn't have any family or babysitters in the area. And so we eventually transitioned into the other room. My wife got to hold her for a while. I can't remember if she carried her into the next room, like when she was wheeled over, or if she was brought to her later. I think she was brought to her later. Talking about amazing nursing staff. The nursing staff dressed Abigail, took pictures of her, did foot and hand imprints on plaster and everything, and they put it on an SD drive. And they said, these are here if you ever want to look at them, but you don't have to. I thought that was really unique but significant that they had taken the time to do all those things.
Absolutely.
And they also gave us any of the clothes she wore because they said, you'll always have these. But they also didn't like put it in front of you of like, you have to look at this right now. It was when you're ready, you can take your time and look at these, which I thought was fantastic.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And my wife was really grateful for that. And I took some pictures of my wife holding Abigail because she wanted them. And she still has those, obviously. And then we were kind of just there the rest of the day. And it's probably the time that my daughter became as empathetic as she is. Because my daughter, who was probably 2 or a little under at the time, like my wife would just break down every once in a while. And she would crawl into my wife's bed and just say, don't cry, mommy, it's okay. And we took that as an opportunity to tell our daughter, like, it's okay to cry. Like, mommy's really sad right now, daddy's really sad. And that's okay, because that's how we kind of express that.
It's amazing how powerful your young living children can be. And I know we've talked about that before, but that's really powerful.
And she still is that way. Like if she sees something wrong with her brother or sister or with us, she's all about justice. Like she wants everybody to be taken care of and to be happy and things like that. She's a great kid.
That's beautiful.
You know, we had not, it's so weird that like we had delayed so many things because we had not thought of a name yet for her. And so they asked us that, and we were just stumped. And somehow that name came to both of us. Abigail did. And so we went with that. Her middle name is Kathleen, which was my mom, or is my mom's middle name. And my mom's a great Grammy and always wants some part of their lives. And we just thought, if anybody was representative, but also could kind of shoulder the weight and importance of that, I believed it was her. And so that's kind of where that came from. So yeah, I think we took the rest of the day was mostly at the hospital. Decisions that you don't want to have to make was like what to do with her remains. And I think we sent them for an autopsy. And then for her to be, I think she was cremated after that, I believe. That's one of the things that was a blur because I was like, I don't know how to make this decision right now.
Yep.
There was a lot going on that I had to try and take care of and be supportive of. And I was like, this is one of those decisions I don't know how to make. And I don't know that there is a right decision.
And you're still a dad to your two other kids.
Yeah.
So it's like,
I can totally relate to that too. I thought there was a decision that I had to make immediately. I didn't know, right? I thought what funeral home, how Beckham was going to be cremated in, what urn. And I thought those were decisions that just nobody told me anything of the time that I had on those. And so I was bringing that stress into conversations with Jessica, those moments in time. That probably didn't need to happen. So you're not alone in that, my man. I mean, first life experience for a real world experience for me, it's you just don't know what you don't know in these spaces.
Yeah. So eventually, we got to go home that day, and we were able to get a babysitter to where she and I could just get a break. I think somebody took the kids to their house, which was in our neighborhood, and we took some time to go get some food because we hadn't eaten and to just be alone for a little while together. And then the kids came home and I think they went to bed pretty quickly. And the next day was Monday. And so Shannon, my wife, had just told her coworkers on Friday that she was pregnant. She was at a new job and she had just told them. And basically had to say, I'm not going to be at work for a while. She works remotely, but I had to tell them why. I had some tests coming up that I had to reschedule. Luckily, in the profession I'm in, like my schedule's kind of up to me. I just canceled everything for the next week. We took the kids to daycare and we went to like Cracker Barrel just to have breakfast and relax. Like as you guys probably know, it's like, what do you do? We have some land in our family north of Knoxville, and it's just several acres, partially wooded, partially not. And we just like went up there to be in nature and be alone, sort of thing, and ride around on tractors and kind of distract ourselves. And that was kind of the next week. You guys talked about going to get books and kind of why you started this podcast. There were no books for me. My wife got some books that were really helpful for her. Like we spent a lot of money at Barnes and Noble one day, just like buying every book there was on that. And I bought random books to just distract me, sort of thing. For the next week, it was like, my wife was reading and grieving. And I was just kind of there. I was distracting myself with like honestly playing video games. And then when she needed something, I was just right there. I would go get us food or make us food, like just kind of in a holding pattern for the next week. And then I slowly started going back to work. I don't think she went to work for about a month. Some of the things I remember, like, because we hadn't made an announcement, in some ways that was easier, but because we had told individual people, one of the things I tried to do was just always head it off at the pass. So like we would go somewhere and see a friend, and I would just say like, hey, just so you know, we don't have to talk about this, but we recently lost our daughter. I just want you to know before you ask a question about how things are going, and like basically you're going to feel worse than I will in that situation.
Yeah.
Because I knew I wouldn't want to be in that situation. So I remember picking up a prescription for my wife one night. I don't know if you guys, if your wives went through this, but it was kind of like an extra punishment that her body still felt like it had given birth.
Yep.
And
producing
so,
milk and things like that.
Her milk came in, yeah.
Yep.
And it was just like extra punishment. So I went to pick up a prescription for her, and I was going through the drive-through, and luckily it was me because the person was like, about to hand it to me. She's like, "Hey, is the patient breastfeeding or something like that?" And I was just like, "No." And she was like, "We probably could have left it there." She said, "Okay, because it'll inhibit milk production." And I was just like, "Yeah, we lost our baby this week, and so we need to stop the milk production." And it made me think of Brad, your comment about like the valet guy.
Yeah, to that poor valet guy.
You maybe you didn't deserve that, but like I don't want the conversation going further. I'm going to put a stop to it right now before, and like that's going to put a stop to it, kind of thing. In my first week of dealing with that, for better or for worse, I had one person in my life that was kind of like you guys. It was a guy in my office who he, right when I started back in 2019, he and his wife went through the same exact thing. Right at like 21 or 22 weeks, they lost their son. And it was kind of strange because I kind of let the people in my office know, like our directors or whatever, like, hey, I'm not going to be in. This is why. They're like, let us know if we can do anything. And he reached out just like, hey, man, I haven't seen you in like a week. Are you okay? I was like, you're probably somebody I should talk to. And it really strengthened our bond. And he was just like, there is no easy way out of this. He said, this will never like really be okay. Like it'll be a little bit easier, but like we're not meant to handle these things, kind of thing. And I don't know that he really said it, but it was kind of like what I gathered out of it was, for better or worse, there's going to be other people in my life who experience this, and I'm going to be there for them because he was there for me and he had other people there for him. I was like, it's one of the worst clubs to be a part of.
Horrible.
So fast forward, a month goes by, and we met with a specialist to basically try and figure out what had happened. And originally, the first OB had said that he firmly believed it was an incompetent cervix. And he had suggested that next go around, if we decide to have kids again, basically just stitch up my wife's cervix and put her on bed rest for 70% of the pregnancy, regardless if you have two toddlers running around, you can't get out of bed. And that's that. You're like, yeah, don't think
sounds simple.
Yeah, jeez.
He's like, I have 100% success rate. It's like, well, you also deprive people of their lives, and like, I don't know what we're supposed to do.
Thanks,
so we
Doc.
saw somebody else.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
We saw somebody else who was a specialist in the higher obstetrics at University of Tennessee, and we had a really, as the phrasing is always tricky, a really great conversation for a couple hours with somebody. And we were trying getting to the bottom of things, trying to figure if we thought it was a gene thing or was the cervix or anything like that. And luckily we had those pictures of Abigail, because after we got done seeing her, the high-risk OB came in, and we had the same conversation with her. And then we mentioned having pictures of her. And as soon as we did, she was like, well, do you mind if I see them? And as soon as she saw a picture, she said, "There's no way that is a 20-week fetus." She said, "At best, that's probably 16 to 18 weeks of development."
Oh, wow.
And we didn't know that. And she asked permission to take a picture, and she shared the picture basically just with another OB or something that said "Hey, what stage would you put this fetus at?" Not giving any indication. They all said 16 to 18 weeks. And for me, that was a huge realization and in a way a blessing when I reflected back on it. Because if we had not lost Abigail when we did, then we would have shown up to our anatomy scan the next morning, and they would have said there's no heartbeat or movement detected, and you now have to make a decision that you either can go home and wait this out until your body naturally goes into labor, or we can induce here. And for as hectic and traumatizing as the experience was, of all the decisions I had to make, I didn't have to make that decision.
Yeah.
And so I am extremely grateful that we didn't have to do that. That decision was made for us. My wife has still since searched for answers, but for me, that was enough closure to know that there was just something that went wrong. And while we'd never want that to happen again, the body kind of resolved it.
Wow.
I was reflecting on Abigail on her first birthday this past fall, right before Eloise was born, and there were obviously a lot of things over the past year that I could get into that my work definitely suffered. I found myself frozen a lot of times, not able to just do things. Time would pass really quickly that all of a sudden I would look up and 10, 15 minutes had gone by that felt like 2 or 3 because I was just kind of zoned out or blacked out of a situation. But when I was remembering her, one of the things that I choose to remember about her, and I shared this in a social media post, is that for all my dark hair and dark complexions, my brown hair and brown eyes, my wife is blonde hair with blue eyes, and all 3 of our living children have blonde hair and blue eyes. So I choose to believe that Abigail, the daughter that I never got to meet, looked exactly like me with dark complexions. And that's just how I sort of envision her. And so, yeah.
It's beautiful, man.
Yeah, that is beautiful.
Scott, let me ask you a question. I want to rewind to something you said maybe 10 minutes ago. That week after you'd mentioned playing video games and just sort of being there for your wife. How do you feel like your grief is sort of, were you making space for your own grief then, or was it just all about supporting your wife?
Oh, I had no space for my own grief.
Yeah, talk on that, man.
Yeah, so I guess that's essentially the purpose of this podcast. Was,
the whole damn podcast, right? Yeah.
So, that's probably always been probably most guys, is kind of what we see now is we're very much fixers. I want there to be a solution or an answer to the problem, and I'm going to do that thing. Or my wife comes to me with a series of problems, and I'm like, well, have you tried this or do this? And I've learned that's not what's
they love when we do that, right? Yeah. Nothing better.
Yeah. So to your point, there was nothing I could fix. And I really realized that in this situation, there was nothing to be done or to be fixed other than to be there and available. Mm-hmm. But because of that, I don't know if it was probably some combination, because I probably wasn't ready to deal with that. And I was probably just using that as an excuse to not do it. But I really didn't know what else to do, because when I looked at the world around me, I saw my wife dealing with an impossible situation and what I felt was pretty insurmountable grief. And I had 2 little kids that still needed to be taken care of and picked up and dropped off from daycare and stuff like that. And I'm pretty good about not prioritizing myself around things like that. So I just didn't. Where that was reflected was kind of what I touched on, is because I wasn't grieving, I just wasn't doing other things. So stuff that did require energy, particularly work related or just thought related, were just frozen. And luckily, that guy I mentioned, his name is Andrew, who'd also been through loss and everything. When I talked to him about that, he was like, well, yeah, you're not properly grieving through this. You're not addressing the situation. And that's why you're like basically losing time. And you see the thing that needs to be done and you're just not doing it. And that's what it showed up as for me. And he actually sort of challenged me to tell the story more and share it. And basically say, like, I'm probably not okay right now. So I started doing that when I was following up with people, meeting new clients and stuff like that. There were a lot of times when I just say, like, hey, there's something about my life I need to share with you right now. I'm working through it. This is not me asking you for anything. But it can make me a little bit off or slow to respond to some stuff. Or like some clients I hadn't followed up with when I needed to. And I was like, hey, I need you to know where I'm coming from. I'm not saying this is an excuse, but it's something that I'm learning how to deal with in the grief and everything. And so, yeah, it was basically just me, like, not sharing the full story, but just saying, like, hey, back in November, my wife and I lost a baby at 20 weeks. And it's interesting. I think if you're not a parent, particularly probably not somebody who gives birth to humans, you may not understand what 20 weeks in a pregnancy means.
Yeah.
I remember my wife calling for follow-up appointments and saying that her baby was born at 20 weeks. And people just being like, like, going through, and she was like, I don't think they understand what that means.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that's hard because you don't want to relive it by saying it, and she's trying to kind of own the situation in a different way. So for me, just like, I had to start talking about it more, and sharing the story. And last April, April of 22, I had the privilege to go to this thing for our company that was for like select group of advisors and stuff. And we had to do this exercise where basically it's an open-ended time frame of saying, like, what do you really want? And you just sit there with a partner, and only one of you goes at a time. And basically it's just open-ended of like, I really want blah, blah, blah. So you start with pretty superficial things, obviously, things you want for your business and your family and this and that. And then you get deeper and deeper. And I remember the thing that I locked in on and ended up repeating multiple times was that I really wanted to meet my daughter. Because that was just the really, really hard thing. It was like, I expressed it to somebody in my office of like, you fully love someone with your heart, but you never get to meet them, and know who they are, who they'll grow into. And I said, that's really the thing, is like, I just want to meet her and know who she is, know what she looks like, and things like that. And I can never know that. So things like that, having the conversations, like, I guess that's how I'm trying to address the grief. And I mean, I think you guys would agree, like, we're never really over it. You see kind of the meme about like,
not even close.
The grief is that like ball in a jar. It's like a pint mason jar. And then over time, like the jar grows, but the grief stays the same. And, you know, kind of on the topic that you guys brought up with the Q&A,
I was going to ask
Brian
about
mentioned.
That. Yeah.
Yeah. So pregnancy after a loss. You can get really torn up about that.
Yeah. How'd you guys even get comfortable having the discussion? And
so that was something, yeah, that was something my wife really struggled with from the standpoint of still wanting to honor Abigail and not forget her, which I think anyone would probably feel that way. I was like, there's no way you're going to do that. We have several things around our house in memory of her. We have a little stuffed bear that's it's pretty heavily weighted. So like you can kind of cut, it's not squishy. It's like,
yeah, we have one of those as well.
And we've got some other things. Shout out to, I wish I remember the company, but you guys mentioned getting those medical bills, and there's a nonprofit organization that covered ours for Abigail.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'll try and shoot them to you guys. Maybe
send it to us so we can put it in our social.
Yeah, I meant to look that up, but yeah, they just in a really hard time. They just took care of that. It's a great nonprofit to contribute to because that's all they're doing is like covering these bills for people who struggle with losing children. So, my wife and I were blessed that we never struggled with fertility. She kind of questioned it at the beginning when she first got off of birth control, and then we started trying. It took more than like one or two times, and she's like, "Something's wrong." As I think,
have her talk to Jessica.
No, right? I was like, "Everything's fine." But anyway, so we never really struggled with it. So then it became like one thing, like other than just having like, are we going to have a baby, is struggling with the intimacy side of it. Like, who's ready?
Great topic.
Are you ready at the same time? Like, what does that even look like? It's hard enough after pregnancy in general, but then after the loss was really hard. And then, yeah, like I was saying, is, still honoring her memory, Abigail's memory. But my wife still, I mean, she straight up said that she wanted to be pregnant. She wanted to be holding a baby, but she didn't want it to not be Abigail. She was like, I just miss her. I remember her telling me, I just miss her and I want her here. And it wasn't that she wanted somebody different. So there's that whole struggle and everything. But let's see here. We lost her in November, and I don't remember. We weren't necessarily trying, but she did want more children. She had told me at one point she wanted 4 kids, which statistically we're right on the money. I think it is like 1 in 4 pregnancies is the average that is a loss. So we weren't necessarily trying. And my wife had gone back to, I think, tracking her cycle and everything. We weren't using protection by any means. And I think she had like taken a couple pregnancy tests when she was like a little bit late. And then she wasn't pregnant. And I remember she was like pretty late on one of her periods. And she's like, I just don't want to take a test and see a negative again.
Yeah.
So it was a combination of like fearing the infertility, fearing the loss, and things like that. And I just remember when she finally did take a test and it was positive, it wasn't super exciting. It was kind of nerve-wracking, a little bit scary. Because it was like we didn't know what really caused the loss of Abigail. And so it was like, what are we getting ourselves into? Is this going to happen again? And so I think we just went to get checked out, and she's like, I just want to be under care of the high-risk obstetricians at UT. So we chose them. And I think she was just going to a lot of checkups, and it was pretty constant.
It's better than bed rest for 70% of the time.
Fair point.
I mean, the OB that we ended up seeing, she was like, "You're fine." It was like she was really, really great, and she was like, "Look, I get where you're coming from," because she deals with a lot of that kind of stuff, and she's like, "I'm not downplaying this." She's like, "You have no indications that anything's going to go wrong again. Every indication is this was a genetic thing, but if you want to do XYZ, we will do it. Whether it was the cerclage or it was you're coming in every single week to get checked out." She's like, "We'll do whatever you need." And so that was awesome. The NPs at the facility, not so great, but like that OB was fantastic. And that's another discussion. You know, it was kind of a weird experience. Everything was always very surreal with the pregnancy with Eloise. We had one scary moment, one really scary moment. Scary moment from like a political sense. And so like if you guys want to edit this out, that's fine.
But your story, man.
Yeah. When Shannon was, I think she was 16 weeks pregnant. She was between 14 and 16 weeks pregnant. That Friday was the Friday that Roe v. Wade was overturned. And when you're fewer than 20 weeks, because when we went to the ER the first time with Abigail at 16 weeks, they said, and she didn't feel movement or whatever, they were like, well, pre-20 weeks, you don't really feel movement. But she had with like our other babies. And so then it's around that 16-week mark was like a Friday. And that weekend we went out of town, not too far out of town. We went somewhere for our daughter's third birthday to celebrate. And she just wasn't feeling a lot of movement when she said she had been the previous week. And there was a lot of distractions happening. It was like, maybe you're just not noticing it because we're kind of out of our routine. We're doing XYZ. And she was just really scared. And we were like, what does this mean? And we got back to town. I think we went out of town on a Saturday. It was just, I say out of town. It's the next town over. It's Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And she's like, I need to go to the hospital. She's like, I can't deal with this until Monday. She had an OB appointment like the following Wednesday. She's like, I can't wait. And so we went. Of course, like we show up and baby's like doing flips in her belly and everything, which was awesome. Like everything checked out. But we were still like, could this mean something? Could there be something else going on? And we didn't really talk about it much until we got to the OB appointment on Wednesday. And they were like, no, everything totally is fine. This and that, everything checked out. But it was a really scary time because right now in Tennessee, it probably wouldn't have been the case at that point, but it was like previously this decision was taken care of for us.
Sure.
But if it's going to affect my wife's life, are we still going to be able to make that decision? The decision that we don't want to make.
Of course.
But it just like came crashing in on us very quickly. That fear.
I understand that, Scott. I certainly do. I certainly do. But you do have Eloise.
We do. And she is awesome. She was not ready to come out. She really liked it. And so if anything, like the oven that my wife bakes the buns in, like they were happy to be in there. She got evicted a little bit earlier than she wanted. My wife, they induced her labor and she tried to push her out. And after like 25 hours of labor in Pitocin, she turned sideways and said, nope, I'm not going that way. And she actually ended up having to be a C-section. So we went from like a home birth, and then Mason was born in the hospital with epidural, but pushed out. We lost Abigail, and then Eloise was a C-section. So like, if you want feedback on what a birth process looks like,
we're going to put you bingo right there.
Yeah, you're going to be on our call list when somebody needs some information. We'll just send them to Scott. Well, Scott, we are so honored that you spent this time with us here.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to see you smile.
Absolutely, man. And to hear about Abigail's story and how your family has continued to grow, and the power of your living children through all of this. And so I wish we had more time, and maybe we can have you back at some other time, man, and to just continue to learn about you and your family. But as always, we want to let you have the last word here and speak Abigail's name.
Abigail Kathleen Beasley. It's my little girl.
God, we can tell the heaviness in your heart, my man. So we will gladly jump in here for you. Thank you for your honesty, your bravery, your willingness to share. And Abigail is a part of our family, and we will be praying for her, and we'll be praying for you and your family. And thank you again for being with us. Brian, any words?
Thank you. I mean, she's up in heaven with all of our lost ones, and thank you for sharing and providing some amazing advice for grieving fathers out there. So thank you. We'll be thinking about Abigail.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you
for all of this and for the podcast.
It's our honor to do it. So listeners, thank you once again for tuning in with us. We're excited for next week's episode. Thank you to Scott Beasley and sharing his family with us. We'll talk to you all soon. Love you guys.
Love you guys.
If you valued from this content, we ask you to share this podcast with others that can equally benefit. Leave us a 5-star review on whichever platform you're listening to help us improve our outreach, and to follow Guys in Grief on Instagram and Facebook. Also, if you'd like to join us and share your story, email us at guysandgrief@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.